Hey, good morning, veganista. Good morning, veganista. Good morning, vegan sister. Y'all doing this on purpose, aren't y'all? This is gonna be. I'm gonna write like a Dr. Seuss lyric for about veganista and vegan sister. I hope y'all are great this morning. Welcome. I tried to start actually a couple minutes early today, and good thing that I did because there was a little technical difficulty. Yeah, good morning. Let's look. Everybody yawn and stretch. Ah, I'm not trying to show y'all my tonsils this morning. Um, Good morning, Igor Z. Welcome. Are you attracted to men? I don't know what that means. Not sure how to take that question. Um, so I don't know if y'all got the in the notice, but I used Invasion of the Body Snatchers because I was watching this film, The Invasion, which is, I don't know, I guess maybe it's from the 90s or the early aughts or the mid aughts or something like that. I don't know. But it's another take on Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And it's interesting because I remember around that time, there were a lot of kind of takes on Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I don't know, they were, I don't know if they were trying to franchise Invasion of the Body Snatchers or what have you. But um, I just found it really interesting because I'm watching that movie and I'm sort of like watching the people once they become pod people, once they become pod people. Good morning, Tom Hall. So watching the people once they became the pod people, and I'm just thinking, wow, what does this remind me of? And it made me think about the it made me think about this whole thing that's going on, like the skeptics community and this whole like sort of idea of like the rational and what it means to be rational. And just thinking about like, wow, is that the world that would be appealing to people where we were all just like we all were just completely rational and we didn't respond with emotions at all. Perhaps I'll keep this demeanor for the rest of the live stream today. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Can you imagine like living in that kind of world? Um, so Igor Z says, please don't ban me. I don't know if I've banned anyone. Actually, there was somebody last week that was being really, really offensive. But then there was somebody who was being like disagreeable, and being disagreeable is one thing, but being like if someone is being just out and out and like using expletives and things like that and insulting people, like I'll just goodbye because I don't just have time for that. And I feel like this is where people feel like it's cool, it's chill, we're chilling out. So somebody coming in and rowdy and roughhousing, and just because it is the virtual world, just because we're not actually in the same space doesn't mean that some of the same social, you know, rules of etiquette apply. So, like, if you're shouting over people, and there are ways to kind of virtually shout over people, no, go goodbye. You get bounced, and if YouNow doesn't provide much in the way of protections, it does provide a feature to bounce folks. So vegan sister is laughing, but I'm just like, it could be that. It could boil down to that, right? We could and even with like YouTube, right? With the YouTube and people getting demonetized and all these things, it's like if we evolve ultimate like eventually we will all get to a place where we are only making content that will is never offensive, could never offend. Maybe we won't even like have faces. We'll just put big boxes over our heads with smiles drawn on them, and that will be our content. So that is where we go with that. In our I don't know what's so there's stuff going on. So we have so who's here this morning? We got we got some folks here. It's a tiny group. Pleasantville, YouTube. Yeah, something like that. Something like that. But I think if I remember correctly, that Pleasantville ended up getting a little bit jacked up. They figured it out. And the Stepford Wives, all those stories about, everyone the same and everyone agreeable. Those things never, um, those things never really work out. So yeah, those things never really work out. But the reason that I brought up Invasion of the Body Snatchers is that I want to start talking about the the way that ideologies get spread, particularly over across social media. And I think I mentioned in my last video that I had, a former student, now friend, somebody that I've known now for, I guess, for exactly half of their life. I've known them since they were 14 or 28 now. So I've known this person for half their life. And I feel like I know the person fairly well. And they were here with their partner. And this person, we're getting into conversations, and then they start saying certain things that were very familiar to me. Like one thing is that they felt that it was necessary that they announced that they voted for Trump, which was like, I don't know why that needed to come up at all, but I don't know what kinds of spaces that person normally moves in. And so, you guys know that I didn't vote for Hillary. Um, and so I think, that's that binary weird binary thing that happens. So it's like this person voted for Trump. Their assumption is that I am this other thing, and it's like, well, no, that's not me. And then as we were having conversations, I noticed a lot during the conversation that this person kept saying, "You believe," and then they would say this thing that they believed, and it would generally be something that's like, I don't believe. I don't know who they were talking to. And you know, I was like, why don't we talk about things that we can agree about? Let's talk about, things that we see. Like the person would say something like they would talk about black on black crime, and I would say, well, do you think black on black crime is the greatest issue that we're facing in the world today? And the person would say no. Well, and inevitably folks always generally land on like either the environment or something along those lines, and they can agree that those are the things that are, the really that are really pressing. But then they go right back to they get right back on script. And I'm realizing it's that there's not a dialogue. There's not a, I don't say, there's no um, popular language that has been popularized around the environment. People don't know how to talk about the environment, and they don't know how to talk about like um, even start imagining what the potential solutions are around the environment. Um, People certainly don't want to talk about, for example, like corporations that are responsible for the majority of the greenhouse gases, for example, that are being released into the atmosphere. They don't want to have that. They don't know how to have that conversation. They potentially don't have those numbers. But even without having those numbers, there's like an understanding about what's going on. Like there's, because it's so present around us, and especially over the last couple of weeks, we've seen disaster after disaster. And I don't know if any of you have friends in Mexico, but I have friends in Mexico, and Chris actually had his does a Spanish lesson weekly with some friends of ours in Cuernavaca, and so he was talking about the earthquake, and so these are things that impact huge numbers of people, right? Nobody thinks it's good to have an earthquake, right? Nobody thinks it's good to have a hurricane. Nobody thinks that those things are you know good things, right? I think we would all agree that we need to have ways to address them, whether they're man-made or not, that we need to have ways to deploy aid to places. We need to, make decisions about how resources get to, various locations, and how the way that we use where we live, where people live, do people need to be relocated because now they're living in floodplains? And these are conversations that we all could be having. But good morning, Camilo Andres Guerrero Cerro. So yeah, so it's so there are there's definitely ways to hold these conversations um, in ways that are like different. The way to have conversations amongst people who don't necessarily know each other, or people who aren't necessarily coming from the same place politically, um, without us even having a conversation about whether you're on the left or on the right. But for some reason, people are just not equipped to have those conversations. And I wonder why that is. And so I'm interested in like what folks think about that. Um, oh, thanks. Um, no, you said, I'm not sure exactly. So where the conversation. So I would love to hear from folks, what are your thoughts about that? Why is it that these conversations always default to the most contentious things, right? To the places where there is, it's not possible to have common ground. Is it that we look at politics the way we look at sports these days? Have things been dumbed down now so that everybody is walking around with the five things that you say in a political conversation with the opposition? You know what I mean? It's like, what is that? How do we get to a place where discussions of politics are so um, have become so generic that I can sit there and just like nod my head, and the person's going to say black on black crime, and the person is going to say equality of outcomes. The person's going to say these things that are just like, what? Okay, all right. So I know that you probably have been listening to Dave Cullen videos or Sargon of Akkad videos or whoever, wherever you get those things. But do you have an original thought about any of these things? Like, what is it that you individually stand for? What is it that is happening when you go home? When you go home and you sit down at the table, what is it that you think about? What is it that you need? How is it that you want to be able to maintain yourselves and the lives of the people around you? How is it that you want these things to play out? Hey, good morning, Just Glowing Me. I don't know much about Camilo Andres Guerrero Cero asked the question, do you know something about the Mexico earthquake? I only know what I've been able to pull from, mainstream media and from a very brief conversation that I had yesterday, that my husband had with some folks yesterday who are in Cuernavaca, that they were fine. I actually have a friend who's from Puebla who, has family still living there, and as far as they know, things are fine. But there's a lot of destruction, and if you see some of the photos, if you see some of the video, it's very disturbing what's happening there. And so there's that. Another thing that was really interesting to me, and I would love somebody to jump in on this and tell me what you think. So this equality of outcomes thing seems to be one of the, thank you so much for the 50 likes, Camilla. This thing about equality of, thank you, Just Glowing Me, for the applause. Thank you. So this thing about equality of outcomes, which is something that I've never liked. Like, does anybody know anyone who's progressive who uses the phrase equality of outcomes? Does anyone know anyone who's a progressive person who uses this phrase equality of outcomes? Because I hear it a lot, and it's what I'm often told I believe in, and I don't even really know what it means. But I was thinking about, yeah, exactly. Like, but I hear it all the time in conversations with people who are consider themselves either conservatives or anti-social justice or what have you. And there are people now who are claiming to be anti-social justice. And I'm like, woo! When those videos come out, when those videos come out later on, you know what I mean? It's like the people who had who were at the civil rights protest and were like, niggas go home, right? Like, and they're on video saying these things. And I wonder, because this was like 50 years ago, so, those folks are in their 70s now, so maybe they don't watch TV. I'm not saying that people in their 70s don't watch TV, but maybe they don't, maybe they spend more time, like, maybe they have a better quality of life and they spend more time with their friends and not sitting down in front of the television. But I just wonder, Just Glenn Me says, why do I keep getting unsubbed from you? That I don't know. That I can't talk. I don't know anything about the technology. But here's the thing about equality of outcomes. Statistically speaking, if we did somehow as a society embrace the idea of equality of outcomes, most of these fools who say, I don't believe in equality of outcomes, would do better. right? Or if you know what I mean, because nobody who's like doing really, really well is engaging in these conversations, right? The people who are doing really, really well aren't on like they're not like hanging out on YouTube right now for fun. Like they're going on vacations. They're taking their people, their families to the summer cottages and stuff like that, right? They're not engaging in these conversations with the regressive left, right? The people who are doing very well and those are the people who might see a dip, right? Anybody who might see a dip if we decided to redistribute wealth throughout the world, right? Considering that 1% of the population owns like 99% of the wealth, right? So unless you're in that 1%, you're likely gonna do better. You're likely going to do better. I would say at least like, at least a majority of the people living on the planet, if we decided to redistribute wealth, would see like a bump in their quality of life. So even though I don't, embrace the notion of equality of outcomes because I don't know what that means. Because I don't know what that means. What scares me about the idea of equality of outcomes is that the people who made the decision about the outcomes would be people who didn't have an understanding of like what it means to be sustainable. And it would be like everybody would have a car, right? It was like ill. No, I would rather see a world where it's like we didn't need cars and everybody had the resources that they needed within walking distance so that we could just, we could like decrease our footprint on the planet in that way, right? So that we would have things being locally produced and things like that, right? So then more people would have work because everybody would be doing that work to produce for the communities that they lived in. So for me, equality of outcomes would look more like that. But I don't think that that's what people are talking about. I think they're thinking like everybody makes the same money, everybody has the same. I don't know what it means. I don't know what it means. Um, but even Tom, I hear what you're talking about. You're saying equality of outcomes and equality of opportunities, but we throw up I feel like we throw up equality of opportunity in response to equality of outcomes. And I want someone to I want the next time I get into a conversation with someone about equality of outcomes, I want them to define for me, what does that mean? What does it look like? What does it look like? And my sense is most people who start talking about equality of outcomes are afraid that they're going to have to give away something to someone who has less than they do. And they're not imagining this version where they actually may get access to the resources that they need, right? They may actually end up getting more access to the resources that they need, but that's a whole other thing. Lord Poo Poo Head is here. Americans are paranoid about all this stuff because they have had decades of anti-communist propaganda. Yeah, I guess so, but I'm going to say this. I mean, I didn't grow up with, I'm not a spring chicken, and I don't recall being raised on anti-communist propaganda. I mean, I think maybe the generation before me, but by the time I was coming up, all that stuff had ended, and like in the 70s, the Cold War basically kind of came to an end and all that stuff. So, all that was in my childhood. So I wasn't really raised on that stuff, and I imagine that majority of Americans weren't really raised on that. I think people don't even know what communism is other than just a word that people use, right? So, Lord Poo Poo Head, you may be absolutely correct. You may be, and I'd have to really look into it and see like what has been how has anti-communism been um, spread in the United States because it's kind of here, but I don't know really what it is. I don't have it. But, I might be smarter than the average bear. I don't know. I don't know. But I don't think of myself I don't hold myself in such high regard that I think I'm special. Hey, Kearney, welcome. So, Veganista says, I've disconnected my TV and internet. I disconnected my TV and internet a few years ago, so I'm out of the loop when it comes to political phrases they're adding to the political hemisphere. Yeah, like I'm now starting to hear them as I encounter people, mostly people who kind of come after me and start saying things. about me that I'm usually scratching my head and saying like, what is that? And then I go and find out and I realize like, wow, there's a lot of people who are out there saying the same thing. So clearly there's a machine out there, whether or not we believe that the media is controlled by the left or whoever is controlling the media today, it hasn't controlled the media enough so that everybody has their script down pat. And so I end up in conversations. I don't know what people have. I'm getting some text here that are just a little bit distracting to me. So I'm trying to decide whether I should action them. Excuse me. I'm just going to respond to this text and say, um, so yeah, hopefully you guys are thinking about who wants to jump in and be part of this conversation. I don't have anybody in the guest queue, um, but I hope that someone will get into the guest queue. I have so many things going on, y'all, that I want to talk to you all about. So I'm teaching this course. You guys, I'm teaching a course, teaching a couple of courses. I'm teaching my Theater of the Oppressed course, which I've been teaching for a good while now. But this year, I'm teaching a course called 21st Century Dramatic Text and Intercultural Dialogue, whatever that means. And so it's funny because it's 21st century dramatic text and intercultural dialogue. And I guess the part of the class that I'm more qualified to kind of juggle. I guess I know a lot about 21st century dramatic text because I've been in the theater for most of my life. But holding those kinds of conversations is something that I'm typically good at. That's kind of my wheelhouse. And what's funny is that we're in a class, like they're all college students. They're all pretty much from the same, they're all pretty much US citizens, I think. And so, I'm wondering like where the intercultural dialogue. So I'm trying to find the places where there are those cultural divisions within the class. And I imagine that like this some of this terrifying stuff that I've been hearing coming out of universities, that universities are these beds of social justice warriors and safe spaces and all these things. And I'm like, my students, not these students, not my students. My students are pretty just average folks who know a little bit about stuff in the world and make a lot of assumptions, but they're not. We have conversations, and I don't see like a lot of thought policing, for example. We pretty much have these open conversations about things, and things get thrown up. Like they were having conversations about the way like women characters are appear in the theater, not in a way that was contentious, but it was just they brought them up, and there was a woman that I could easily identify as female in the class, and who I would identify as female in the class, who was talking about this idea of the nobility of this character was in the fact that they loved someone else enough. We were talking about Hamilton, and then we were talking about the character Eliza and how Eliza loved Hamilton enough to forgive him. And then that is the message. That is the message that we draw from the play. And that person said that completely unironically, and they said it, and it wasn't a complaint. It was like, yes, the person felt like that they were swept up in the romance. And somebody else in the class was saying, well, maybe that's the way, women have been conditioned to think. And like that was about it. That was about as, SJWE as it got. But the conversation happened, and there were, people who were identifying as men, female, and I think there are people who probably are, gender non-conforming in the space as well, and everybody's just getting along and having a good time. Nobody seems shut down in that space, and so I'm just wondering, where is that happening? They consist of randomly breaking news. Baltimore and Jacksonville NFL players kneeled and locked arms during national anthem. Wow, this just happened. I guess that's kind of cool. Um, it's interesting that that's become a thing now. Like that's become a thing. The critical thinking involved for all of this to happen, and I think that that's something that I want to talk about as well. We've been talking for the last couple of weeks about like how do you hold these conversations? How do you have these conversations when no one seems able, like first of all, people aren't even in touch with reality enough to have a conversation about like what is going on in the world. but how do you have those conversations with people who disagree with you strongly about things? That was something that was put out, and I want to talk a little bit about that. But this vegan sister, what vegan sister, just going me, everybody seems to have a vocabulary full of empty catchphrases. Yeah, I'm kind of agreeing with you. Vegan sister, so the randomly breaking news, that's cool. Interesting to me that now that's a thing. Critical consciousness around patriotism. Critical thinking around patriotism seems to be emerging now in the United States, which to me was like unheard of unless you were, somebody who was out there trying to be a revolutionary, like you were a Black Panther, basically. And so to see that kind of thing on the rise is very, very interesting. And I would love to talk to folks about how they see that playing out in their own experiences. Even if you're not someone who sees yourself as political, do you encounter people in your daily life who are beginning to question the just like, because I was born in this country, I'm supposed to agree with everything that my country does, and I'm never supposed to say a negative thing about the country that I live in. I wish they would just walk off and refuse to play. Just Glowing Me says, I wish they would just walk off. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine if NFL players or, professionals in any field out of protest would get up and walk out? In some ways, that's what May Day is supposed to be, right? That's what May Day, they've been trying to get people to do that on May Day, people to just not go to work, to not go to work. And the impact that would have, especially because that hits people in the purses, right? Just Glowing Me, to start their own league like back in the day. That's interesting. Just Glowing Me, have you seen Seren's video? And that's Sensei Aisha Tamatu's video on desegregation or integration, and the idea that integration, when you look at it historically, integration has hurt communities of color, because now we see like those communities are back to being segregated, but the segregation is like, that's what you chose, right? But also it means that because now certain affluent people of color who are affluent now move into the spaces that used to be identified as whites only spaces, and what happens is it's left poor people of color in those people of color spaces with no resources. And now they just say, well, go to the thing, test in and go to that school. Or now it's like, go to the charter school, right? Tom Hall says general strike. Yes, you're on the same page, talking about May Day, right? They're trying to push for a general strike every May Day. One May Day it'll happen. One May Day. I hope it's not too late. Yesterday, Trump said NFL players who kneel should be fired. That to me sounds like the government trying to stifle people's freedom of speech. That to me would, but you know what's interesting? I don't want to say what people said in response to that, but I'm going to be looking for the responses. How many people say, yes, I agree that NFL players who kneel should be fired? Because I bet they don't even see the hypocrisy in that. I don't even know. I don't know if people see the hypocrisy in that. I don't think people see the hypocrisy, for example, when Milo Yiannopoulos was, and he resigned, right? Milo Yiannopoulos resigned from Breitbart, but come on now, be real. There was no version of that where Milo Yiannopoulos was going to still be working at Breitbart after coming out and saying that thing about the age of consent, like his things about the age of consent. But nobody was like, wait a minute, stop it. This is about freedom of speech. This is no. The same people who want trying to prop up Milo as a savior were the same people who were happy to quietly let him go creeping under his rock when that time came. Right? Still looking for somebody to jump into the guest queue and just rap with me. I don't care. We can talk about anything. Just Glowing Me says, I saw her. I love her. Yeah, that's so I'm a separatist. Ooh, that's interesting. We should talk. You should get on and talk about that, Just Glowing Me. I'm just saying. And now suddenly more players feel compelled to kneel. why were these not kneeling with Kaepernick? Well, vegan sister, come on now. Come on now. You know it takes people a while to screw up their courage, right? They want to make sure that it's not gonna hurt them too much to do it, right? I'm gonna see, let me see who else is doing it. Let me poll public opinion and get everything, and then you know why they weren't kneeling with Colin Kaepernick. I don't even know why you asked that question, but it's a good question. But I know you know the answer to that question. Yes, LOL. They stopped him like a hot potato. I think just like me responding to Milo Yiannopoulos, I would be willing, but I'm getting ready to go to work. Y'all always got excuses for me. The next person who gives me an excuse, I'm coming to their house. The next person who gives me an excuse, um, we could do it another Sunday. Okay, cool. And you know what I'll do is I'll do a little bit more reading, and so like I can ask you intelligent questions about it. Vegan Sister says, "Oh damn," and I'm wondering if that's about my threat to come to your house, or I'm wondering if that's about my threat to come to your house, or the fact that Just Glowing Me is not going to be my guest today. So let me see what is going on. I can't even see my guest queue because I'm scared. So yeah, so nobody's in the guest queue. We are a half hour, 32 minutes into this broadcast and some change. Oh, Veganistas in LA. What are you doing in LA, veganista? What are you doing in LA? I'm interested. So, and I don't know, should I stress the veganista or should I stress the 007? Because that seems crucial to the name. So what's going on? So yeah, all right. So what was it? Choo 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 choo. Talking about we did the talk. Oh, I had something I wanted to talk to you guys about. I had something that I wanted to talk to you guys about. So, oh man, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Death Note. It's a Japanese anime series. There was only one season of it. At least there's one season of it that I know of. And the season is, I believe it's 34 episodes. Believe it's 34 episodes. And there was a film recently on Netflix, and I don't think I did a review of it, but if I didn't do a review of it, I may be doing a review of that. I have so many reviews. Just Glowing Me says, yes, my child watched it. It's good. I think it's good. I like Death Note. I like Death Note. And after watching the anime series Death Note, it made me so disappointed in the Netflix version where people were first of all saying that they whitewashed it, and I'm like, I don't know if you've seen a Japanese anime, but those characters are white. Those are not Japanese looking characters. I mean, generally they're extremely fair and they have like giant big Walt Disney circle eyes. They're white. They're white. They're avatars and they're white. So it's like so whatever anybody is saying, you can't really whitewash Japanese anime because they're usually the characters are drawn as very, you know, phenotypically, European, right? So that's one thing. So let's let go of that. But what they did do that screwed it up to me was in the Netflix version, they went out of their way to make Light a an heroic character. And if y'all watch the series, that ain't how it goes down. That is not how it goes down. But here's the idea. So in Death Watch, there's a notebook. There's a little notebook, and it says, not Death Watch. Death Watch is a play by Jean Genet. In Death Note, there's a little notebook that these sashimis, or I'm not sure exactly what the name of the sashimi is a type of tofu. It's a type of sushi, so y'all have to forgive me for not knowing it all. But there's these gods of death, and they have these notebooks, and when they write your name in the book, it's over. Period. It's over. And so one of them drops the book to Earth, and the you know, this light Yagami picks it up and has the power of the Death Note, so he can write people's names. And the idea is that he only writes the names of bad people. But as soon as I heard that, I was like, nope, nope. I watched anime before anime was cool. Kimba, Speed Racer. You know what's so funny is that I watched Kimba and Speed Racer, and I didn't even know that that was anime. That was just the cartoons that came on TV when I was a kid. So yeah, didn't see the TV version. Um, Veganista is going to be is Veganista says so. Okay, all right. So I'm following you guys. You guys are asking questions. So okay. Anyway, I'm going to keep talking about Death Note. Here's the thing with, and yeah, a moral quandary. Here's the thing. For my money, if there was like, if simply having murderous thoughts makes you a bad person, what is the difference between someone who wishes that a bad person was dead and a person who just wishing someone dead anyway, right? Like, I don't see the, like, yes, there's a difference between wanting to stop, like, for example, if you're fighting for your life and in fighting for your life, you end up killing the person who's trying to kill you. That's one thing. But for example, like the death penalty, like once that person has been put in a cage, what is, what is the point of, killing this person? And I feel like I'm troubled by that. And I'm not trying to virtue signal y'all. I'm troubled with the idea of someone dying for a crime because one, there's always a possibility that that person made a mistake, and there's also the possibility that that person could change. There's the possibility that that person could change, and so the person that you might be ultimately putting to death might not be, might be coming from a very different place than they were coming when they committed these crimes, regardless of how heinous the crime was, right? And as soon as, especially in a society where we have authorized some people to kill, we've authorized some people to kill, and other people have not been authorized to kill. The people who are authorized in the administration of violence in our society, those people could be doing it out of some, malice. They could just go into a line of work. Well, I'm privileged. I get to kill because it's my job. But that person might morally be in the same exact place as the person that they are pulling the switch on, right? And so if you watch the anime of Death Note, you see those characters, they may start doing it for the sake of good. They might start doing it for the sake of good, but ultimately they just get that rush because they have been killing, and so they just get the taste for blood. And so, are we simply reinforcing this idea, like the worst parts of ourselves? Tom says the death penalty is a crime against us all. I asked my child, what's the difference? Jessica Lee says, I'm just going to go back here a second. What's the difference between anime and cartoons? And he hates that you call them cartoons. They're cartoons. I think they're cartoons. I think anime is just the Japanese word for cartoons. And I know that there's a particular style, but that might just be because they draw those characters to look in a certain way because that's how they see, those are like standards of beauty are different in different places, right? Um, Creators of Kimba sued Lion King for basically stealing it. It was an out-of-court settlement. That's interesting. That's interesting. For those of you who don't know Kimba, Kimba was the white lion. Kimba was the white lion. I believe Kimba was like a white lion, maybe from the family of white lions. I'm not sure, but Kimba was like kind of like a savior figure. But he was the white lion. He was the white lion. Just saying, he was the white lion. Anyway, so all that said, the Lion King, but the Lion King basically was like Hamlet, right? But with lions. So did Kimba take the idea? Was Kimba based on Hamlet as well? So I don't know where if they really have a strong argument for that. But if it was settled out of court, it was settled out of court. But so that's what I was thinking. So I'm watching Death Note and I'm thinking that we have, and it happens in the course of Death Note, they actually call this out. There are people in the society who really do believe that it is justice when someone who is evil, whatever that means, right? There's a whole ideology behind that that I don't want to mess with. But when they believe someone is evil, for that person to die is just. They see that as just. But they also see it kind of as, you know, that it's God is the one who will judge them, not people. But yet people end up doing the judging, and then what kind of a if you're being like religious, is that not sinful or what have you? It's a hot mess. You can't really talk about it. There's no clean way to talk about it, right? Like my clean way to talk about it is that like if you are desiring the death of a living being, there is something corrupt in that. To want to kill for whatever reason, there is something corrupt in that. There is possibly feeling like, well, I don't know what else to do, right? I don't know what else to do, and to kind of to allow things to happen. That's one thing, right? That's what most people who consume animal products are doing, right? If they had to kill the cow or the sheep or the chicken, right, they might not be willing to do it, but because it's happening over there and I don't see it, then it didn't really happen. Just please let me eat my steak. Don't talk about it. Just let me eat my steak, right? So there are people who are like that. But then there are other people who are like, ooh, let's see, there's going to be an execution today. Like the people who like bellied up for a front seat at lynchings, the people who belly up for a front seat at an execution, right? There are people who are like, can't wait to sign up and go shoot people. Nope, nope. For my money, there's something corrupt. I'm not saying that that person is corrupt, but there's something corrupt in that person that is celebrating murder for me. And there's like sequences in, like I said, there's sequences. There are sequences when there are like crowds of people who are like basically ready to lynch someone, and I'm like, nope, nope. There's those are and we see that often, right? And so bringing that back to these political conversations as well, um, there is some sadism in wanting to see these people, punished. There's some sadism in wanting to see people punished. There's one thing to understand that we use punishment because we don't know what else to do. But that doesn't mean you want that. You can agree that that is how it's done now without being like, okay, he's going to get it, right? Or there, right? And we see so much of that. We see it in, you know, I don't even want to talk about like Cheetah right now is going on a thing, right? Where he's like on this hunt for pedophiles, what have you, right? Interesting about that, I don't know if anyone has noticed, but Vegan Cheetah has been focusing his attention on the men who are interested in young boys, when most of what he has shown, most of the evidence has shown that the most of the targets of this stuff have been young girls, right? Or young people who can be identified as girls, right? Who are identifying as girls now, what have you. But Cheetah has been focusing on, and I'm like, that's not just. That's not justice. He's not seeking justice. He's trying to be sensational, and he's using the exploitation of these kids in a way that clearly is titillating to his audience, right? It's not like, oh, he's found a noble cause. No, he's doing what he does, and it's gross. And what he's doing that's gross to me is gross in the same way that, any of these people that he's showing having these conversations with these young people, right? That's just turning them on, right? If they're not touching those kids, if they're not like putting nude photos of these kids, it's like they're playing with something that's dangerous, right? They're playing with something that's taboo. And I can understand that that is wrong, but I also think putting it out there to titillate even further is wrong as well. So, don't, don't. Somebody is somebody kills someone. Someone is a mass murder. Someone is guilty of heinous crimes. Doesn't make the fact that we have a justice system that provides for the execution of those individuals should not make it delicious. Yeah, vegan sister. Um, I was babying. Veganista says, I'm going to read down. I question his motives. He gets banned from you now, and suddenly he's on the hunt, right? And I think for some reason, it might be a way for him to like undermine you now and like say that there are people who are worse than me. And all you have to mention is pedophilia these days, and there's blood in the water, and the sharks come to eat. But my thing is like uh, Charles has been giving a live sex show to minors for the past 2 years, as far as I'm concerned. He doesn't know who's watching, and I'm sure a fair number of his subscribers are 13-year-olds. But it hasn't stopped him from putting on a live sex show. Like I said, a live sex show for the last 2 years. Veganista says, I was babysitting my nieces and popped in The Lion King and thought, wait a minute, this is Kimba. A couple of years later, Kimba sued and won. Kimball, Simba. Interesting. And there's even a similarity in the names. I forgot about that. So that was back on the anime. You guys have a couple of conversation threads happening. Absolutely doing it for views, vegan sister. Yes. Just going me. You saw the video on the subject. Great. Thank you for commenting on that. And yeah, I did a video, and I'm probably going to continue talking about these hypocrisies in the way we talk about topics. And also, there's uh, Locomotive is one of the regular viewers has been kind of calling out the lack of like real research, the lack of real in-depth investigation that happens with folks, even people who are like in the comment section. So y'all, they're starting to police the comment section on the Reg Flowers channel, y'all. So people are gonna have to start coming correct. There are people who are like asking for people to do their research and to bring links and to bring evidence instead of having these conversations. And I think that that's great. I think that that's great, that we should be in a place where we listen to everything and there's a little bit of like interesting if true, right? To begin to question everything, and I think that that's so important. I know y'all question the hell out of me, so that's a whole other thing. But yeah, and I don't necessarily see myself as a person who does a lot of research. I know there are folks who frequent the channel who bring a lot of research to me, and I end up getting introduced to a lot of stuff. But I know that I would have to go way, way, way down some rabbit holes to really understand a lot of these issues. And so what I tend to do is I point and I'm like, look, y'all, there's a rabbit hole there, and there's a rabbit hole there, and there's a rabbit hole there. And then I'm like, how far down do you need to go? And if you're not willing to go down that rabbit hole, maybe you should withhold judgment. I'm just saying, that's kind of what I feel like I do best. Veganista says, I can't even listen to Cheetah. He lives in a bubble and he is racist. Like, I don't even like the list of things. I don't want to, I can't say I don't want to badmouth Charles, because I guess I have badmouthed Charles. Um, it's more like what is happening. Okay, so someone is racist. What is the material effect of their racism? What is the material effect of that racism? What is the material effect of this thing that's doing? And for me, there's a material effect of young people's faces being shown in a market where it is probably not appropriate for their faces to be shown. Do you understand? Like, so who control, like when he shows the face of those children, who is he showing them to? And if he has built an audience of people who have a taste for nastiness and corruption and the vile and the scandal, and then he shows the faces of these children in that market, to me, there's a material effect. He's basically exposed them to people who might potentially target them. So that's where I'm like, that's where I draw the line. Where like, what is the material effect of what is being done? And if I can't find that, then I'm like, okay, well, I'm not sure. I don't know. Then it's a matter of my morality versus his morality. And my morality comes from like the way that I was raised and what I think. And I don't feel like I have the right to impose that. So racist, not racist, veganista, 007? Yeah, probably. Probably. But it's not a crime to be racist. And we live in a society, especially, I don't know if you are in the United States, but in this country, it's just part of the culture. It's part of the culture. Like tea time, like tea time is part of, it's a cultural tradition. But what is the material effect? So yeah, and so like privilege and power, and I feel that like the idea of Charles potentially reinforcing certain types of privilege, certain types of power. Yeah, I believe that could happen to an extent, but is then the Vegan Cheetahs channel the place where that is happening? Like, is that happening the most, right? Or is that just like that's happening on every channel? That's happening on every channel. There's racists all over the place, right? There's people who are guilty of unconscious bias all over the place, and there are people who are like outwardly racist, right? There's like the Tara McCarthy's and the Tara McCarthy's of the world, and I know like Corey McCarthy's of the world as well, who come out and just say things that are like they are really trying to reinforce, and they are trying to present this propaganda. They're sharing this propaganda that they intend for people to believe, and the effect that they are going for is that people will decide that will embrace ethno-nationalism. They will embrace white nationalism. So they have a goal in mind, and I don't know, just because they have that goal in mind, I don't know how effective it is. But the material effect, to me, like the material effect is like when someone is endangered by that, and I'm not sure what where Charles's racism um, puts people in danger. Just because I don't think that he has the authority to do that, but this is not like, I'm not saying that to shut that down. That it's coming from you, like we're sharing it, we're having that conversation. So there is a position where Charles is um, causing harm through the way that his racism is manifesting. And but I would want to see that. I would want that to come to the point where it's like the where it hits the pavement in a way where like who is walking with handcuffs, right? Who is having food taken out of their mouths? Who is being stalked by you know criminal, like so those I see a situation where those girls are then being stalked by individuals who saw them on Charles's channel and in this context, right? Or them, you know, those images being seen by somebody that they go to school with, right? Because I don't know if they have, I don't know if they have, you know, thousands of followers on their YouNow, but Charles has, maybe a couple thousand folk who might watch a video, right? And so that's thousands more people who are seeing those girls' faces. Veganista says drama is his market with a little racism, a little misogyny. Yeah, all that stuff is in there. I see that stuff is in there. But I think what happened when those little girls' faces were shown was beyond just an ism, and I think there was harm. There was harm that was done in showing those faces. He's not a very far-thinking individual. He's very immature. Now, see, like, just going me, you're a perfect example. You don't show your child's face in your videos. You don't show your child's face in your videos, and I really, really, I really respect that because you have made a choice that that that's not something that you want to do, right? And then there are other people who do show their kids' faces, right? You have to think about these things, right? You have to think about what is it that you're taking on when you when you show things and when you share things, right? You also talk about things that are really controversial on your channel, and so I imagine that you saw a possibility that that might be something that comes back and you know is harmful, especially like where you live, and you talk about these things, right? And then there are other people who talk about things where it's like it's not gonna come back on them, right? It's not gonna come back on them. So Vegan Sister says even Onision, and this is terrible because I don't think I've ever heard the name spoken out loud. Even Onision, a YouTuber I cannot stand for many reasons, including racism, does not show his kids in videos. Yeah, yeah, but then there are people that I know and that I love that do show their kids. So I'm not saying that it's necessarily bad out of hand to show your kids, but Onision is his channel is quite controversial, right? It's controversial. So it's a different thing. It's a different thing. And I think Charles, with his particular content, where he appeals to people who I don't want to say that, his viewers are, I don't want to call out his viewers for being gross because I watch his videos sometimes. But, somebody who's going to watch your video because they want to hear the latest dirt, you know, it's probably not the place where you want to be showing, some little kids' faces. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. So that's it, y'all. I don't know. I don't know. I've run my mouth long enough. Actually want to make a video today. Yeah, so you're going, so just going me. Well, I'm saying goodbye too. Why you gonna say goodbye while I'm saying goodbye and trying to snatch my thunder? You sit there and wait. You sit right there and wait. Because as I said, I once fell into a YouTube wormhole and stumbled upon some disturbing YouNow clips. I'm sure. Okay, so here, listen, y'all. Listen, y'all, it's been great hanging out with you. I hope y'all go on to have an amazing day today. It's been great. I'm going to be picking up these themes. Likely there's going to be some, stuff is going to be coming. I always promise y'all things, and I do eventually get to them, really, but there's a lot in the queue. Um, yeah. So so that's it for this video, everyone. Those of you watching on YouTube, like this video if you like it. Share, comment, subscribe. And this is Reg signing off. Love yourselves. Peace.